C-Rob, you sort of blew my mind. I'm just going to be transparent here for a second because we were having our production meeting, getting ready for the show, and we started talking about flag football. And I guess I was shook because all I thought was, oh, flag football players must think it'd be kind of cool to play in the Olympics. And you blew my mind because it's about so much more. Like everything else in the world is about money, follow the money. But it's about so much more than that, C-Rob. It blows my mind to think that the owners are sitting here thinking about globalization of a sport.
Yeah, I mean, it's about television money. That's really what it's about. If you really want to boil this down, and the through line here is the NFL is sitting there and they've been staring at this problem for years. How do we become a global sport? The NBA managed to do it. We have not. Soccer, the Premier League, they managed to have a global presence. We have not. How do we achieve this? They've been staring at that forever. And I think, they aggressively targeted Western Europe and the UK. And I think they've planted the seeds there. They've got traction there. They've got television contracts there. They have real fan bases. They're building a 33rd NFL team in the aggregate. Someday they'll get to 17 games that are played outside of the United States. And that means you have an international team now because they're playing a 17-game slate, not in the United States. That's all great. But NFL owners for years have been sitting and staring at India, China, countries with massive populations where the NFL, there's really nothing there for them. They're an oddity at best. No one plays the sport. They don't understand the sport. They don't know the players. Lamar Jackson could walk around China. You go to Beijing, roll through Beijing, and most people aren't going to have any clue whatsoever who he is. And, so the way I kind of focused this was years ago. I spent some time with Jerry Jones. We were talking about China, about how to crack the market. And he made what I thought was a really interesting, he kind of approached it from two standpoints. One was sort of top down, where he's like, hey, we do it, you do it the way you tried to do it in Western Europe and the UK. You deliver them the NFL product. You go and you play some games there. You hope eventually that saturates enough, of a fan base, and then you build it from there. It's a very much a top down approach. But he's like, to do that, you have to cultivate fans having rivalries with each other. So he kind of was like, you have to get fans in Shanghai and Beijing to identify with certain teams and then sort of have the friendly rivalries we do as fans in the United States. And that stokes things. And that's, it helps to build a real meaningful element of traction for the sport. But then he said, there's a flip side of it. Maybe you just need to give them a reason to pick up a football. And he's like, and that's not so simple, but really, maybe that's the way you start. Just get them to pick up a football, not thinking about the NFL, but thinking about the sport itself. And so when this resolution came about, and we'll see if they actually vote on it, I still think there's a lot to be hashed out, but clearly, talking particularly to the C-suite levels, you talk to team presidents, they're for this 100%. And it feels like the owners are for this 100%. The general managers and the coaches, not so much. But I think the way the NFL looks at this is, okay, we go to the Olympics. It's a global stage. All these other sports, hockey's had the Olympic stage, baseball's had the Olympic stage, basketball's had the Olympic stage, soccer's had the Olympic stage. We've never had it. So maybe our way to crack China, to crack India, to get a football in the hands of fans at the most basic level, the most organic level, is to get some element of our game into the Olympic stage. And every 4 years, we present, here's some NFL players, some of which might actually play for your flag football team in your country. We'll have our own, loaded U.S. team. And that's how we will present the game. That's how we'll get a football in the hands of fans. And that's where we'll really start to plant seeds that will get people interested in football as a sport, and then the NFL as the best expression of that sport. And then when that happens, and you grow a fan base organically, the TV contracts come in. This is I kid you not, this is a decades long play in the making. I think this is the next best shot that they've taken, but this is a 20, 30 year, 40 year problem that these owners are thinking about and trying to lay the groundwork now and hope that the game flourishes, in 2050 and 2060, when you have a Chinese fan base, you have a fan base in India.
Do you think this works? Because I just keep thinking of flag football in the Olympics, and I'm so lukewarm on it. I don't understand the game as it compares to the NFL game, obviously. Right. I mean, I know completely different rules, completely different game. And the whole dream here, no pun intended, is that it's going to work exactly like the 1992 U.S. men's Olympic team worked for basketball, where that just incredibly helped grow the sport globally. Like, there's no doubt about it. Those couple weeks in Barcelona, and by the way, it made me feel incredibly old when I was writing about this the other day and thinking a majority of our audience is like, oh yeah, the Dream Team, I've heard of them, but that was before I was born.
Yeah, never saw
it. It kills me. But trust me, guys, it was a thing, a huge thing. But that just seemed like such a magical conference of the greatest players in the history of the sport, Jordan and Magic and Bird and all that. I just don't know that you can replicate that with flag football because it's a different game. The U.S. is going to kill everybody. Like, I don't see anybody competing. So, really?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, first off, props to David Stern for that brilliance. May he rest in peace. That brilliance.
It was as good as it can get. Yeah, that was
right. What the Dream Team was really about. That's the great deep meaning behind the Dream Team. It wasn't, hey, we just want to win the gold medal. David Stern's like, no, hell no. Mm-hmm. Like we want China. That's what we want. And when they got China, it changed.
And now, from what I know, everybody there is wearing Kobe jerseys, right? Like that's the thing. Like that, it was incredibly, it was genius. But I don't know if this works on the same level.
I don't know if it does. That is what is intriguing about this is that we don't know. Like, we have no idea what this is going to look like. We don't know what NFL players will participate. We don't know what they will look like on a flag football field. It's different. The size of the field's different. The rules are different. It was funny. I was talking to somebody in personnel. We were kind of shooting about flag football. And he said, look, man, I'm going to tell you right now. He said, for years and years and years, I watched 7-on-7 football in Texas. And he's like, and I would see high schools with the absolute worst football teams on a high school football field who were absolutely the best 7-on-7 teams in Texas. He was like, it was the weirdest oddity you would ever think. You think terrible high school football team, they're going to have a terrible 7-on-7 team. He's like, nope. They would win 7-on-7 tournaments over and over and over again, just because there's differences between the two games. And he said, look, I don't know. He's like, I have no idea how, the NFL players can just walk on that field and be able to dominate given how the structure of the game is a little bit different. Personally, I assume they will. If you get the right mix of guys and the talent, ultimately that wins out. Now, does that take root? Do people across the world look at, Tyreek Hill or Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson and are so enamored that they're like, man, I want to do this. But I'll say this: George Atala, he was a union executive for 16 years, right? He's talked to players for years and years about the Olympics. He's convinced the stars of the NFL absolutely want the opportunity. He said they geeked about it. And he also agreed. He said, I think this is the best shot the NFL has taken at really trying to be truly global. He's like, instead of ramming your product down people's throats by going and saying, we're going to play games here and we're going to try and make it a big deal. And we're just, all the logistical nightmares of traveling halfway around the world to play a game. He said the simplistic approach of a ball in a field might be enough because it removes the need for equipment, other than a pair of cleats. Got a pair of cleats, and you don't even really need cleats, if you're just going to go and play with your buddies. A ball in a field, just like a ball in a hoop. That's all you needed. And by the way, I thought this was a really good point. He said it removes gender barriers. He said women can play flag football. Anybody can play flag football. He's like, so you completely remove any barrier to compete. You put a ball in people's hands and you let them fall in love with the sport itself. And then eventually what they do is they look outward and they go, where are people playing this the best? Maybe they look at, I do. I think that's realistic. I have a goddaughter who she got really into soccer, right? All of a sudden she picks up soccer. She starts playing soccer. And what did she do? She's like, who are the best soccer players in the world? She started paying attention to that. And I think it's possible that could happen.
I will say I did a little research on this. Currently, as of 2025, the beginning of 2025, there were 20 million people in 100 countries currently playing flag football. Like that's It's pretty staggering numbers. It is the fastest growing youth sport in America currently, and 12 states have now started processes of making it varsity sports. And you're right, C-Rob, that includes men's and women's. So I think there are layers to this. And Frank, so much of what Frank has said here, I think rings true for a lot of us, where you say, well, it doesn't look like the football we're used to. For the rest of the world's okay with that. They don't need it to look like the football we're used to. Like, they need it to look like something
I just
fun
wonder
and
if it
exciting.
translates to the NFL. If people watch flag football. But I get, it's just getting guys, and Charles, you made a good point the other day. We're talking about our production meeting. All of a sudden, Patrick Mahomes is playing without a helmet on. You could see him, right? And Patrick Mahomes is pretty much worldwide famous at this point, but other guys like Jahmyr Gibbs or whoever is going to be Justin Jefferson, like those guys who we don't necessarily recognize, like we recognize Charles Barkley or Larry Bird or whatever. All of a sudden, those guys playing without helmets and playing without the big shoulder pads, maybe that does help their global brand, and maybe that does. So I get it. Hey, I do get it. I'm just curious how it's going to play.
By the way, one thing not lost on this that will supercharge this. Guess who's really going to be into it? Guess who's really going to be into pushing those guys as brands worldwide? The shoe companies. The shoe companies that already have presence in these countries. You're going to tell me that Nike isn't going to go, yeah, man, let's make sure that people in China can see Lamar Jackson. Like, let's find a way to streamline their ability to see him in the shoe companies are going to go nuts if you put NFL players in the Olympics. Apparel companies, I guess I should say, not necessarily shoe companies, but obviously well-known apparel companies. They're going to be commercials out the yin yang, right? And then it flows right into training camp in 2028. And just imagine you have Lamar Jackson rolling into training camp with a gold medal. There's a lot to be gained here, I think, from the NFL and I think from the NFL players. And obviously injuries are a concern. There's anytime someone's out there running around, well, even if they're not, there's not full contact. If you watch flag football, they're wearing mouthpieces. That means things happen, right? Like they're hitting each other occasionally. They're falling down. Stuff happens. It can be physical. But like one team president said to me, this is about the good of the game, not so much the good of the team. And he basically said that's what the NFL was built on.
Which is the basketball model. That's the basketball Olympic model too.
Yeah.
Stick there though for a second. See, Rob, expand on that for a second, because I think it's important. Like, fans hear it and they think, oh my God, I don't want my favorite player to get hurt playing in the Olympics. Right. But you're saying that, hey, sacrifice one for the good of the many. That's a risk they're willing to take.
I think, again, the C-suite level of the NFL, I think owners, I think team presidents, I think people on the business side, I do. I think that's the risk they're willing to take. When you talk to GMs and you talk to people in personnel departments and coaches, no, absolutely not. They complain about it. Like, they don't like it at all. They're very, it's not something that they really are excited about. And I think it's funny that the league meeting where this is, potentially talked about and passed, there's no GMs or coaches at this meeting. And maybe that's part of the reason why. But it's I even had a GM say to me, like, he's like, I don't even think the Stars will really want to play. He's like, because it's like, I got to do qualifiers, and then, they got to get picked to, be on the team. Now I'm just adding all this scheduling stuff for the next couple of years. Do I really want to make this commitment? I asked Natala about that, and he's like, they're wrong. He's like, they're wrong. Like, these players are absolutely, like, they are geeked about it. And one of the things that we kind of talked about when we said in the production meeting that I thought is pretty crazy. If you think about it, in the NFL, hardware matters, right? You want to have a Super Bowl ring. Everybody's got a Super Bowl ring. You want to be able to show that off. Well, they hand out 53 plus Super Bowl rings every single year. Every single year. You're going to hand out, 12 gold medals every 4 years? Be pretty dope to be Patrick Mahomes and retire. And then when you're stacking up your rings versus Tom Brady, go, oh yeah, and I also got 2 gold medals.
Also, I'm just putting my fan hat on for a second again. The minute we have Alabama versus Georgia, and like we keep talking about college football needing to figure out how to balance Title IX and NIL money, the minute we start having co-ed flag football teams that are wearing the logos that everybody roots for on Saturdays, I think this is going to end up, it's going to end up being its own subcategory apart from football that people are going to fall in love with. Okay,